All right, so we've got to talk about this whole DOJ going after Google thing. It's serious when there are articles piling up like crazy. And we need to break it down because this isn't just another headline. This could actually change how we use the internet. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. This is a big one. It's not just about, Google paying some fines and then everything goes back to normal. The DOJ is going for some pretty huge changes here. We're talking potentially breaking up Google.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, wait, what? Break them up? Have it?
Yeah, so some of the proposals are kind of mind-blowing. They're talking about separating Chrome Android, even the Play Store.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
I mean, I knew Google was big, but wow. So what's the thinking there? Why do they want to dismantle Google?
Well, it boils down to this idea of a monopoly. The DOJ is basically saying that Google has become so dominant that it's actually hurting competition.
So instead of just, paying a fine, this time they might have to completely restructure their entire business.
Exactly. And that's where those structural remedies you mentioned come in.
Okay, yeah, that term I wasn't totally clear on what that actually meant.
Yeah, it's basically legal jargon for we're going to make you change how you operate. And to understand this, we need to think back to historical examples like the breakup of Standard Oil. Those kinds of actions were taken to prevent any single entity from having an unfair advantage. And that's what the DOJ is aiming for here, a level playing field.
Okay, so no more Google automatically popping up when I open a new tab.
Well, that's one of the things they're looking at. They want to give users a more active choice in their search provider.
Which, honestly, I can't even remember the last time I used anything other than Google.
Right. It's become the default for so many people.
So besides the whole search engine thing, what else are they proposing?
Well, data harvesting is another big one. The DOJ wants to set limits on how Google can use our data, especially for things like AI products.
Okay, now that one hits close to home. We all knew Google collects a ton of data, but this case makes you wonder, what are they really doing with all of it?
Exactly. And should there be stricter rules?
Right, because imagine if they're using data from your Gmail, even if you haven't explicitly said they could use it for AI training.
That's the kind of thing they're trying to get a handle on.
Wow. So if the DOJ has its way, we could be looking at a very different Google.
Potentially, yeah. One with less data collection, more transparency in how search results appear, maybe even a different search engine as our default.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about.
It is, but of course it all hinges on whether the DOJ can actually prove that Google is acting as a monopoly.
Which, knowing Google, I'm sure they have a lot to say about that. They're not just going to roll over.
Exactly. They're already pushing back hard, arguing that these changes would stifle innovation and ultimately hurt consumers.
Well, of course they are.
Okay.
Those are some pretty big accusations.
They are, but it's important to hear both sides of the story. Google's argument is that they've achieved success by providing great products and services, not by stifling competition.
So where do we go from here?
Well, next, we need to dive into what Google's specific arguments are and really unpack the potential fallout from this case because, let's face it, Google is so embedded in our lives that any significant changes are going to have a ripple effect on all of us.
Okay, so the DOJ is ready for a fight, it seems like. But Google's not backing down. So what's their main argument here?
Well, they're really leaning into this idea that these changes would hurt users.
Hurt users.
Yeah, they're saying that breaking up the company would lead to a worse user experience. Imagine your Google login not working seamlessly across different services anymore.
Oh, man. Yeah, not being able to just easily switch between Gmail and Drive and everything. That would be annoying.
Exactly. Or think about it this way. A lot of those services are free right now. Google says that if they're forced to change their advertising model, they might have to start charging for things that are currently free.
Interesting. So they're playing the convenience card, but also the we'll have to raise prices card.
Right, because their whole argument is that their current system benefits everyone.
But isn't that what every company says?
Pretty much. But it's not as simple as it sounds. I mean, on the one hand, less targeted advertising could be seen as a win for privacy.
Yeah, because let's be real, those targeted ads can be creepy sometimes.
Totally. But on the other hand, Google's saying that their ads allow them to offer all these amazing free services.
So it's like a trade-off. We get convenience and free stuff in exchange for our data.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is that Wall Street doesn't seem to be too worried about all of this.
Yeah, the stock market has been surprisingly calm. Investors aren't totally convinced that the DOJ will actually succeed in breaking up Google.
So maybe they've weathered storms like this before.
Well, there have been some close calls in the past.
Like what?
Remember what happened with Microsoft back in the day?
Oh, right, yeah, with Windows and everything.
Exactly. They were facing a massive antitrust case. And while they weren't broken up, it did lead to some significant changes in how they operated.
So this whole Google thing could go either way.
It really could. It could fizzle out, or it could be a watershed moment for the entire tech industry.
Okay, so let's say hypothetically that things go the DOJ's way. What are some potential outcomes here?
Well, in the short term, even if they don't completely break up Google, there's still a good chance we'll see some big changes. More scrutiny, potential limitations on data collection, more transparency in their algorithms.
Basically a whole lot of shaking things up.
Exactly. And all of that could have a big impact on their business.
So much to think about here. I mean, part of me is like, yeah, sticking to the man. But then the other part of me is like, wait a minute. I use Google for like everything. So is this whole thing actually going to be good for like the average person?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to be honest, it's really hard to say for sure. There's always a chance it could backfire.
How so?
Well, one concern is that if you break up Google's different services, it could lead to a much more disjointed user experience.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like right now, you can seamlessly move between things like Gmail Drive Search. But if those become separate entities, who knows what that would look like?
Yeah, not to mention all the different accounts and passwords we'd have to juggle. I can barely keep track of the ones I have now.
Exactly. And on a larger scale, there's this idea that breaking up Google could actually stifle innovation.
Wait, really?
Yeah, because think about it. Google's size and reach have allowed them to build this incredible ecosystem where everything is interconnected. Disrupting that could have unintended consequences. But maybe we end up with a bunch of smaller companies all vying for our attention, but none of them are able to achieve the same level of integration and innovation that Google has.
So it's like a trade-off. More competition versus potentially less innovation.
In a way, yeah. It's a classic dilemma with no easy answers.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I've learned a lot.
Me too.
It's crazy to think that this case could have such a huge impact on the future of the internet.
Absolutely. It's a real turning point.
So what do you think is going to happen?
Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. But one thing's for sure, this is far from over.
And we'll be here to cover it every step of the way. Thanks for diving deep with us, everyone. Until next time.